All right, hi everyone. Sorry for the technical difficulties there. It's been a challenging morning for my technology side of things. This talk will actually surprisingly dovetail really nicely, I think, with the conversation we just had with Autodesk, because it represents a little bit of the sort of the other side of the viewpoint. I'm here today to basically share some insights and some context about the journey that we went through from essentially idea to today's multi-project collaborative initiative that is the ORI today. And while this presentation has sort of a chronological component to it, the timeline of events is probably a little less relevant than the approaches the team took to solving problems and sort of the community of people engaged in the outcome. So I'll mostly be focusing on sort of that aspect of the presentation. So today's conversation has 4 parts: the product mindset, building community and velocity, delivering value, and growing impact. So first up, we'll talk about a product mindset. The genesis of sort of the work towards where we are today with the Open Review Initiative was a survey that the ASWF sent out in the spring of 2020 or so, asking its membership sort of what were the pain points that we were experiencing and that the community in both animation and visual effects were feeling, and how could the ASWF help. Not that anybody really needs a strong reminder of this, but the spring of 2020 was a complicated time for lots of folks. This was the early days of COVID. Lots of offices had closed. People were struggling to find ways to collaborate with one another. In generally, there was a lot of confusion around sort of how the businesses were, how everyone was supposed to move forward. And this was a time when some studios that had moved towards multi-site strategies earlier in their journeys had solutions to address some of these collaboration problems, but many didn't. And even in the short span of from 2020 to now, the collection of products and services and workflows that we're all getting very used to and comfortable to using today in terms of this collaboration, they really didn't exist. And so we took that advice and decided to see sort of what we could do about it. The first thing I think about when I reflect on this process was really like having this product mindset and how it helped us sort of think about how to solve problems. The many popular open source projects, as you've seen in this particular presentation, started out with someone solving an internal need. They had a problem, company solved it. Turned out that problem was useful and meaningful for the community. Those libraries get released. Over time, through sort of feedback and iteration, a broader collection of use cases and functionality grows, and they become more and more useful. We did not have any of these things. Oops, sorry, my slides are going nuts. We didn't have any particular product or service to offer. We had a survey that said, hey, we think review is a problem. People are struggling with this, and we really, and the community could really need some help. And so what we had to do is we had to sort of reflect on, well, all right, we know there's a problem. We don't have an active solution. We kind of have to iterate and decide for ourselves where we think the opportunity is in this space, and what are we going to do about it. So to answer those questions, we had to sort of start with a classic product management problem, which is consumer insights, right? Like, what do we know about our community? And how do we understand what problems they are trying to solve for? So the working group created a persona document describing who we were trying to serve. Conveniently, the working group itself was made up of a variety of interested parties, and their shared perspectives on the utility of review and its application became a great place for us to start identifying like who we were serving. This did raise a particular problem for us, though, because as we got into the personas, we realized that review is one of these things that serves everybody. It's sort of naturally embedded into the entirety of a creative graphics pipeline. Everyone from the render wrangler trying to double check that the renderer that is on the farm isn't actually black, to executives in a creative conversation discussing which black is the right black, right, is all sort of encompassed in this sort of same conversation. So we had to be thoughtful about, like, what are we actually trying to achieve, who are we trying to serve, and what does it mean for the community for us to address any of these problems? The next part was sort of, as we started to establish sort of who the people were who we thought were going to gain value out of anything that we could deliver, was, well, like, what does good look like? We knew from the existing projects in the community, and we knew from the survey that there were a collection of features and requirements that people seemed to be struggling with. And we had to understand sort of what was a minimum viable product. Again, this is sort of back to that product mentality, right? Without anything to anchor our strategy on, we had to sort of think for ourselves around sort of what would bring value to the community. And so we laid out what we thought was a minimum viable product document. We sat down, and as the sort of the formation of this working group started to get going, we sort of drafted this. This is what we think excellent looks like. We then took that and said, okay, this is our opinion. It's not necessarily anything which is concrete. It's a collection of ideas. And so we compared it to the existing space in the community. We did a broad survey of all of the stuff that was available for doing playback and review systems in the community, and did a comparative analysis matrix of what are their features, what are their functions. We ended up with this very large matrix spreadsheet of what the community thought good looked like across both proprietary systems, commercially available systems, open source products, and that gave us a really good sense of sort of what do we think, what does the community think good looks like, and we were able to map the two things together, the sort of our minimum viable product document and that matrix document gave us a good example of sort of what we thought was potentially the opportunity. I did want to take a moment to talk about standards and convention. One of the things which was clear from the survey and from our conversations was that interoperability was an important part of how people were trying to work, that meant that we had to get serious and be thoughtful about best practices and guidelines around important pieces of how those systems might work. From a product design perspective, it meant that we had to think about standardization, because reviewing media relies on a lot of this sort of idea of a shared experience. Because the review process is about confidence in decision making, and those decisions have broad impact on how any shot gets approved, how any show is on or over budget. There's sort of a large impact to sort of the decisions that happen in the review space. We needed to be thoughtful about that shared experience was the thing that drove confidence and the value in these review processes, right? So ensuring everyone's looking at the same image at the same time in the same color space with the same annotations, right? All of these things are relevant to the confidence in that sort of factor of decision making, which makes review such a critical portion of the process and graphics pipelines. And we needed to be really thoughtful about how we were going to do this in ways that to sort of guarantee that interoperability and collaboration was possible with anything that we made. To facilitate that, we started identifying and cataloging elements that we thought were critical for this sort of conversation around collaboration. We needed key elements of interoperability and taxonomy around metadata and the description of objects that are part of this review cycle. And so we dove into standardization around taxonomy and terminology around the process of review. Wow, there's no good, cool slide to represent metadata. I tried even like Mid-Journey and stuff, but I do love this quote. Being a love note to the future seems like the appropriate context for metadata. We also had to think about some of the core media. Encoding turned out to be a huge thing, especially as more and more collaboration is happening on the web. Our ability to maintain the integrity of the image and the experience that people were having meant that we needed to really have a much better understanding of how the encoding could be used as a medium for guaranteeing that consistency. And this is particularly important as anybody who's been playing in this space for a little bit on the in the web browser space recognizes that none of the current collection of main web browsers does color the way it's supposed to right now, and there are some efforts across some standardization bodies to get that better. But today, you really have to know what you're doing if you want to trust what the browser is trying to tell you especially for reviewing media. So now that we had an idea of what the product might be, it came down to sort of thinking about like how do we build a community and how do we build velocity around these things. Our due diligence let us understand the market, its needs and opportunities. It took almost a year for us to get to a place where we had what we thought was a reasonable foundation of here's who we think cares about this, and here's what we think we can help them with. And in that time, it was really all about building engagement and building the sort of the community around this idea of solving a big problem like this. Fortunately for us, moving from making to doing was really accelerated by the interest across many of the existing ASWF membership companies. That really jump-started the conversation and provided a great starting place for contributions on key aspects of both the diligence and understanding who our community was. Once we had iterated on what we thought the opportunity to serve the community was, we landed on a need for essentially a playback system that was scoped to support the needs of everybody from freelancers to large enterprise studios. And what followed was a series of months of presentations and demonstrations of implementations of players and features and systems across the community by their various owners and contributors. And I did want to highlight that this was a unique moment in my experience in open source where we had a collection of essentially competitor companies, many whom had proprietary playback systems that had served them well for decades in some cases, who were genuinely interested in the value of a shared solution and were open to demoing their products and the specific features that made them special and unique and valuable in the particular context that they were using them to effectively a community of their competitors and strangers. And this openness was really important to both the understanding of kind of what we needed to try to achieve, because it really set the bar for sort of kind of what the active community was doing. But it also set the stage for a really open conversation about and collaborative conversation about what people wanted out of a product like this. So on to delivering value. We had all this tremendous community support, and we had the backings of companies like DNEG and Sony and Autodesk, who jumped in early on and said, we want to be a part of this. We think we have value to bring to the community. We think we have both products and resources to be able to apply to the problem. And in doing so, we were able to spin up and convert our working group into an official sort of project of the ASWF, and that's the thing that was announced last year at SIGGRAPH, officially the Open Review Initiative. We announced both at last year's SIGGRAPH, we announced both the release or the tentative release of those two projects, as well as the release of the encoding guidelines. And this was a sort of a section of time where the sort of the year that transpired between, I guess, well, 6 months now that transpired between last SIGGRAPH and the release of those products in January of 2023 was really sort of a heads down period of the teams just iterating on trying to get stuff out, right? So we go from building a community to actually having to try to ship product, and that shipping the product was really critical path towards sort of building some trust with the external community around that these projects were going to exist. It was going to bring value. It was going to be something that was permanent and bring real opportunity to those who are seeking solutions in this space. One other just note back on sort of the product side of things is that sort of open source projects sort of function, or I would like to think that they sort of function in the same way consumer products do, in that they rely on this sort of flywheel effect of the perceived value of anything attracting a community of collaborators, that value driving engagement and contribution, and that contribution driving sort of delight and evangelism in a community. And if you can keep these sort of cycles moving, if you can continue to sort of add collaborators, add contributors, and bring on evangelists, you continue to bring spiraling value into these projects. And it's been through all the hard work of the contributors and collaborators in this space that we've gotten to a point where we're sort of in the last throes of the first round of this cycle. We've attracted a great community around us. We've released some foundational products that are building blocks for a future of collaboration in the product space, and we're hopefully moving into the delight and evangelize phase here with some of the upcoming work that's coming out of our sort of platform focus for the future. And that platform focus is really where we talk about growing impact. One of the key insights for us early on was that interoperability between systems was a desirable thing. It's not enough to release standalone products and applications without building the frameworks and the tooling to enable them to interoperate in a way that the existing ecosystems of tools in the space might need to work with. So this is where our proposition for growing impact lies with the Open Review Initiative. We've really begun to explore, we've taken these two foundational products that are part of our suite, XStudio and OpenRV, and we're really sort of building on them as the catalysts for a strategy of interoperability. They are springboards for our development and experimentation and what a common review experience could be like across multiple players and different sets of use cases and requirements. What we have today is an emerging community of folks who are working on not just these two core players, but I/O tools and a shared plugin framework. We've released a standardized proposal for synchronized playback and interoperability based on Open Timeline I/O. We are experimenting with UI skinning capabilities that will essentially use a common core of the playback engine, but allow for fully customized experiences if you wanted to build one. And the standards and practices work continues to try to guarantee that no matter what we do in terms of annotation or drawing libraries in the future, that the ability to leverage these core components of what collaboration means in the review space are going to neatly interoperate across systems in the open source, could be integrated into your private proprietary systems in scenarios where, say, a studio and a vendor need to work together but want to use different systems. We're trying to head towards a world where we bring value to the community of all products, as well as the two that we support currently in the foundation, to allow us to bring this sort of platform of interoperability across all the people who want to contribute and all of the ways that media and review interacts in a graphics pipeline. A quick bit of acknowledgments in that there were a ton of people who were part of this for a very long period of time. This isn't everybody, and I apologize if I've missed someone on here, because there's a tremendous collection of collaborators across many different companies, studios, software companies, even folks outside of the space in other areas of technology. And I want to thank them all for their hard work and continued support. That's it.